Welcome to today's town hall for the heliogenic civilization, in which we explore infrastructures of generosity, the pathways towards the heliogenic civilization. And today we're looking at the pathway from politics to agency. And our guest is Sebastian on behalf of the Initiative for the Regenerative Market Economy, sharing what that initiative is working on. The format stays the same, so we will give Sebastian the stage in a moment to describe what he would like to describe to us. Then we will have a brief conversation between the two of us for some clarifications, and after that, open it to everybody. When we do so, please raise your virtual or physical hands so that I can ask you to unmute yourself and ask a question. We try to have one question at a time, maybe a follow-up from a person so that we can have a diverse discussion here. Okay, with that, Sebastian, welcome. And over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. As always, I'm just right away sharing my screen here and starting the presentation. So what I like to talk about, as Thomas said, is about the governance and the agency, especially of the people, to drive a systemic change within our society and our economy that is also reflected by the heliogenic movement, I would say. So the regenerative market-based economy stands for holistic, symbiotic economy with natural ecosystems and within planetary boundaries to enable a prosperous life based on the principles of justice, freedom, and nature in a market that serves future generations. And I think this is what we are talking also about, the heliogenic society and the movement behind that, what the regenerative market-based economy is aiming for. And so how do we approach that? First, developing in a participatory way with all the actors and that are part of that general movement. We developed this guiding principle. We host a podcast with now more than 18 episodes where we have conversations on the topic of a new Wohlstand, where I'm coming towards to later on, with the actors of that transformation. We host the regenerative salons. Last year we had 6, and we are going to continue that in this year, where we bring together the people and talking about this transformation and the best practices and the activities. And what is really important here, that we go not only in the large cities, but we're really going in the whole country and bringing the people together, which is, I think, very important, because most of the movement is really going to unleash its power and its effects on a local level. And then we do also research where we explore what this regenerative economy is looking like, what are the companies, what are the factors of a company that is going towards becoming regenerative as a company. And this research project is going to end next week, and there's going to be the final presentation of this project next week. And then I think in the weeks to come, we are going to publish the results of this first research project on the topic. And then, as we already mentioned, Wohlstand. Wohlstand is a German word and stands for prosperity, but you can also translating it with wealth and well-being. And the paradox we are in right now, that Wohlstand or prosperity is really focused on the monetary part. But if you're taking it in with the whole holiness of understanding of the word, it's also about that Wohlstand is destroying Wohlstand, yeah, or prosperity that we create destroys future prosperity, yeah, just by the setup of this kind of economic system and acting that we are in right now. And so, and then there's more, the question is, okay, how we create Wohlstand that lets life thrive, to create a good life. and not to destroy Wohlstand, which is supposed to create the circumstances of a good life. And I think that makes the whole concept quite obvious. And I prepared some quotes from media, yeah, where the topic of Wohlstand is in the headline. And for example, top decision makers fear loss of prosperity, energy crisis, inflation, recession, loss of prosperity, or Wohlstand in that term, a summary of the joint economic forecast fall 2022, and so on and so forth. So we have this term of Wohlstand all over the place, but it really always points towards not a good life, yeah, but in a loss of GDP. And if we are looking just in that perspective, that really creates also a lot of fear, because when we are talking about the loss of prosperity, and it really is also hitting us personally, people get feared, and we really see that currently happening in Germany. Yeah, as economic growth not only slows down but is becoming negative, and that creates all the populist movements, or the foundation for populist movements, because fear is really the driver of this whole discussion of drifting apart here. And you can also see that from kind of more humoristic point of view. Yeah, on the left-hand side, the perspective that must be adopted for worries about loss of prosperity, or we will be probably all have to adjust to our loss of prosperity, shows the inequality, yeah, that we also have in society. But when you go and ask people what Wohlstand means for them personally, yeah, it's not so much about money. It's about well-being. It's about security and freedom and health and happiness and family and friends and so on and so forth. And yes, there's also money. Yeah, but this is just a little part of this whole bubble. And when I have this presentation, I always ask people to fill out a Mentimeter on that. And the picture always looks similar to this. Yeah, so people, when they attribute Wohlstand to their personal lives, it's not money, and it's definitely not GDP what they refer to. It's about different qualities that really makes a good life a good life. And that also reflects what's happening actually when we look at the development of GDP, for example. Yeah, on the right-hand side, you can see the development of GDP in the United States. Yeah, starting at 100% in 1970s, and we all know, yes, it grew over time, and I think in Germany it doubled the last time since 1978. But when we look at other indicators, for example, like the Generating Progress Indicator, or GPI, that measures all kinds of developments, not only the economic development, then we can see that actually the development is flattening out since the 1970s. And some of the indicators, for example, index of social health, it's actually going down. And then the question is, okay, what the economy is working towards too, and how we really can change that based on creating another indicator than just GDP, and deriving the actions from the governments towards creating this good life. And that also is reflected on the how wealth or prosperity is actually allocated or distributed in the society. And you see that there's a very uneven distribution by tens in the society. And it's not only with this snapshot here from 2017, but also the development that it's really developing towards the upper tenths of the society and the people. That is the only part where really the income distribution is gaining. But in the rest of the society, so 90% of the people, it's really getting not better but worse. Yeah, it's an allocation, and if someone gains, someone else has to lose. Yeah, and when we see who loses, then it's the downward percentiles in the distribution here from 1991 to 2016. So how we want to approach that with the initiative for market-based economy, and I told you about Wohlstand, and I think we need to come up with a new understanding and a term for Wohlstand. And therefore, we created this project called New Wohlstand, and we are going to start with a campaign in the cinema where we create a short movie to present to the German cinema goers later this year, where we're going to have making people sensitive of what a good life and also the understanding of good life, Wohlstand could mean. Then we are going to create a civil council, which is happening not only in Germany, but all over the world, to ask the people what good life really means to them. So that we are not being a kind of just a think tank where we are going to create this meaning of what good life stands for, but we really need to have an even distribution throughout the society and the people to ask them what good life stands for. Then based on the results of this People's Council or People's Council, we are going to create an expert council that is going to work on the results of the Civils Council and creating concrete an action plan for the political parties, how to create this kind of new Wohlstand for the people. And we are going to present the results at the summit in September to the politicians, but also to some of the participants of the councils and to a greater society with a media campaign. So it's all about first activating with the cinema campaign, the participation by activating the people across the society and ask them what is this new Wohlstand really is for them. Then we're going to see the insights in creating the plan for really put that into action and then create the action in the end. And we do that starting now. So we are currently in fundraising. We are going to execute the Civil Council from March to June, creating the expert council and the actions that we are going to create and present that in September. So as I said, we are in fundraising to that. So the cinema campaign is already financed. So the production and the media value is already committed. We are currently in the fundraising for the Civils Council and some funding for the Experts Council. The summit itself is also financed, and we're also looking for some more funding for executing that from the initiative point of view and the team. Good. So closing that now and asking Thomas to give his questions to me.
Thank you. So my first question would be to understand in more detail what you hope to change in the political landscape of Germany with that activity. So how is that going to be reflected in the political arena in the long term?
So I think in the long term, it's really important to have this clear call of what we are working towards to as a society, as an economy, that we are striving for a good life and not just improving GDP. But this is a long-term view. I'm really realistic on what we can achieve short-term, because there are a lot of past dependencies on the current political parties, which makes them hesitant for real change. And in the end, what we're looking towards to is a real systemic change to make it feasible to go into the future with a good concept of how things should work in a society and in the economy. So long term, and I think this is a key, but short term, we also need to be realistic that maybe we can get into some of the programs of the political party for the next election in Germany. I think if we can achieve that, that would be a real success. Yeah, and finding some people from the political parties understanding that we need this different kind of guiding principle for our society and economy. But I think we are going to unleash the power more in the mid and long term when we also increase this kind of grassroots movements by the people and getting more power by exemplifying by real cases and an impact that we're creating more on the local level to show that things are really adding up. It's working, and new industries are really developing, but we need to make also the politicians aware of that now so that they can start relating towards what's currently happening already within our movement and all the companies that are starting to change that right now.
I have two more questions before I'd like to open it to all of us. But the first one being, there's currently a lot of activity in Germany around a really strong push of a small group of fascists that are attracting large numbers of unhappy um, citizens.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, what is your take on um, this dynamic from the perspective of the initiative and the new Wohlstand campaign?
Yeah. So my analysis of this development is that it just isn't as a result that we see that the social contract in Germany seems to break apart, and people are feared about how the future might look like and how they need to change to cope with the developments that are currently happening in the world, and that they're really being affected by them by, for example, I don't know, changing the heating system, cannot afford going into the summer holidays, flying somewhere in the world, or the rising food prices due to the internalization of external costs, for example, cheap energy. So it really hits the people, yeah, in their daily lives, and it really also makes them open for this kind of populist and also fascist reflects on, okay, we are going to solve that for you, and it's going to be easy, and the solution lies in the past. And I think people are quite open to that. We only can change that if we are able to offer something where they see prosperity, yeah, on a personal level, and growth on a personal and a family level lying ahead of them in the future. And if they don't see that, they probably fall into the traps that are lying around everywhere currently in media and in the public discourse of these parties. And they are reacting to that. And if we are not offering them something positive that is sound, and they want to follow because it's offering an alternative, then we are going to see this divide in the public opinion, and more people going through towards the right-wing parties. And then we are definitely going to see a disruption, and all based on that we are going to see a breaking apart this social contract, which we need to change by aligning our aims and objectives and mission towards creating a good life.
Mhm. A final question. The population is quite agitated. Hundreds of thousands of people are hitting the streets to demonstrate the fact that they don't want to live in a fascist state. And surely there is more activity than the initiative and the campaign in Germany. What other organizations and campaigns are you noticing at the moment, and what are your thoughts about them?
Yeah. So I think, and that's actually a good thing. Yeah. So there are a lot of initiative popping up following similar approaches, but addressing different topics that we are addressing. And there a lot of the civil councils are happening right now around the topic of how we should nourish ourselves, how agriculture should look like, and the people have opinion. And if we are having this open conversations and utilizing or creating warm data with these conversations, then things emerge that going exactly towards to this common understanding that we need to optimize towards a good life and not just certain indicators. And yes, we have Extinction Rebellion and the Fridays. And I just had an interview with the Last Generation, one of the leading figures. And interestingly, we had a really common understanding of what is going wrong, but we had a different understanding of how to approach that. But they're also going towards it and having the question, okay, what we are striving for, and we have to talk about what good life and will look like and how equality of becoming effective as a citizen and the distribution of power and so on and so forth. So I think there is a general understanding of what's going wrong, but we need to get into the doing of making things right. And I think being inclusive with the people and getting out of the bubble, for example, also the bubble of the next generation, isn't, I think, a very important thing. Yeah, and this morning I also talked to a journalist creating another initiative, and they are going especially in the countrysides and bringing the bubble into outside of the bubble, and having, for example, a Maya Göpel and others talking in city halls about the transformation to really enforce the dialogue between the different bubbles. And I think we need to cross that. And there is a lot of, especially in the democratic movement space, that we currently see organizing a lot of the demonstrations that are going on. And I think there's a lot of movement, but we need to now create this momentum to make offers where people can relate to and say, okay, it's about a positive change and not a negative change that the public discussion is, and especially in media and also in public parties, driving that into the wrong direction. And that's why I think we need more grassroots movement and talking about, hey, it's happening on the ground. Yeah, that's why we are doing, for example, the salons across Germany, getting the people together that are currently creating positive movements and also positive results. And then I think we get this positive momentum and also the positive narrative where people can say, okay, I'm not following the right wing because it's also not going to work. Let's follow someone who's currently doing good stuff, and it shows that it's actually working.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to open it to all of us. Who would like to go first? Please put your hand up, virtual or physical. Make sure I see all of you. Any questions, feedback, remarks, anything you would like to add or know or deepen in this?
Yeah, I have a question, Sebastian. How's the response by the salons locally at the moment?
Yeah.
Like, do they ask like what can they do next? How they want to participate? Like, because I'm super curious when you talk about grassroots movement, my opinion would be like, okay, a lot of people want to participate somehow. Like, what do you tell them?
Yeah. So the feedback is actually overwhelming. So, because first of all, we invite people personally. We want to bring together networks that are already existing, and we have a close to zero no-show rate. So people really show up, which is normally, with the inflation of having events and so on, is normally not the case. And then we always work together. We work on really concrete topics and questions so that we're coming up with some concrete outcomes of this kind of conversations. And we are creating follow-ups. And things that happens after each of the salons is people coming from a little different area asking, I want to host a salon as well. Yeah. And from every salon, I could host at least 2 new ones. So it's really exponential. If I would have the capacities, I could host every week a salon, and we bring it across Germany probably in a year or two. And the people want to learn from the other salons and the other communities from their best practices. So what is working? So, and how you solve this kind of problem and challenges. And there is a lot of requests to connect, so to say, the salons and the initiatives with each other. And that's why I think the salons, and that we are hosting the salons, is a way of creating a community of communities. Yeah, because of all the grassroots communities doing things on the ground, so that they become aware of other communities and other activities, and we can learn from each other. And then 2 things happened out of the salons that are super concrete. One is that we found, for example, an entrepreneur saying, okay, I'm pledging 500,000 in media value to bring your movie into a cinema. Yeah. And this was just really after a second conversation. And activating people, and also the research project was a result of one of the salons. Yeah, and therefore really concrete things happening. That's good for us as initiative, but it also brings people together, creating real live projects together as a result out of the salons.
Malte, do you have a follow-up?
Yeah, I can talk for hours. Is there, like, in the beginning when you launch salons, is there a common understanding of Wohlstand already? Or does it need kind of like an alignment, like this is how we consider it at the moment and this is where we want to have it?
Normally we give a quick introduction into the initiative, yeah, and to give an understanding what the initiative is all about. And then I raise normally with this voting tool the question, what is Wohlstand for you personally?
Mhm.
And then I get this tech clouds, and they all look always similar. Yeah, so there is really within the people a common understanding of what Wohlstand is, and it's going beyond this meaning and this notion of it's about money and it's about GDP per capita, for example. Yeah, so there seems to be, and I think this is really interesting, this common understanding of Wohlstand without telling them how we see what Wohlstand is.
Interesting. Like in an ideal scenario, where would you dream the initiative would be in 5 years?
So I think in 5 years, if everything runs smoothly, millions of people know about the initiative and the meaning of Wohlstand, to define it differently. That, for example, the economic institutions start measuring how the progress of our country is measured not only by GDP, but we are having kind of a setup that is measuring new Wohlstand, so to say. Yeah, and this is in common use, and it really becomes kind of part of that people in the political space are not talking about soziale Marktwirtschaft anymore, but talking about regenerative Marktwirtschaft. And we have a joint understanding of that. And I think then we would have achieved a lot, because that would also mean that the economy is starting to shift towards creating businesses and business models and products and services that are building on this regenerative understanding of how things could work, really to foster the creation of a good life.
Great, thank you. Who else would like to pose a question? Please show yourself. Claudine, please unmute yourself.
Thanks, Sebastian. If I understood correctly, you said that you are inviting people specifically. So could you speak a bit to who you're inviting? You decide that. And then the other thing is, like, I just been to a long meeting this morning here in Munich about a potential project on bioregion Munich, where we got stuck was on the funding. So could you talk?
Like always.
Yeah, exactly. So how are we getting out of this H1 funding trap, that we all seem to be facing? And What's
So
your pearls of wisdom?
if I would have a viable solution for that, I would be happy to share that, but I haven't solved that yet. So I have an hypothesis, which I'm happy to share with you. But maybe starting with your first question, how we invite people. So right now, I think it's important to create a diverse set of people that all see themselves having agency, meaning they want to change something and they have the will, the purpose, and maybe just the willpower also to do so. Yeah, because I think we need to create with this first salon that we host in a specific city or area, we need to bring the change makers together. And we do that to ensure the diversity, that we always have the local hosts, mainly there are 2 or 3 from the local area, that invite a number of people that they think that have agency and drive really things forward. And by bringing together the people from different co-hosts, we normally get a very diverse group of people. So I think if we get things going and we increase the networks, then it really should change over time. So that doesn't mean you have always the same group of people, but we have then a rotating group of co-hosts that are inviting their network, but we let the communities grow and have a series of salons in that very region. So we are about to develop this right now, so we are happy to share how this is working, but it really seems to work so far. But together with Diana, we are currently trying really to find the heuristics, yeah, how to really make that work. And then we are going to share that with all the communities that we are creating, so that we have the cohesion and the reciprocities within the communities, that this is really going to work. Yeah. So it's, let's say, in a development stage of a prototype stage. Yeah. So, and regarding the fundraising, I
Just
talk,
a
yeah.
small request. Could you, while you do that, unpack what H1 means, Horizon 1, 2, 3, for everybody in the room to be on the same page? Thank you.
So Horizon 1 means further development of, or let's say down development, and giving some more time for the existing paradigm in the economy, yeah, which is, let's say, making the S-curve a little longer, yeah, to keep things going. But this is not going to bring us in the safe space. Horizon 2 is all the disruptive technologies that are going to supplement with better solutions the existing solutions. And the third horizon is really, let's say, the transformative horizon, where things are not only let's say, regenerative in that end, that they're just better in comparison with the existing, but they are really creating this different function of an economy. Yeah, for example, that we get more abundant services towards the commons, etc., etc. And going back now to this funding solution, I think it's not coming from classical foundations, at least here in Germany, because they are very tightly bound towards their purpose of how to allocate money. They have their very strict rules, they have their own interest, and so on and so forth. And I have very little hope, yeah, that large foundations are going to shift a lot of money into that. It might happen, yeah, but this is just the impression that I have. Public money also very difficult, because it's a lot about project finance and so on. And we all know you're not going to create change with project finance, because it's a project and the finance of the project always going to end at a certain point in time. And if the project finance ends, so what you're going to do with your people? Fire them? Yeah, or what, right? And so that's also difficult. So, and now I'm coming to probably the most likely viable solution is I would call it liberated money from those people that were able to accumulate the money in the first place by internalizing the commons, yeah, and externalizing the costs, and by doing that, accumulating the money, understanding the meaning and the sense making, and then utilizing in a philanthropic or a real newly to defined impact investing way the money to funnel it into this kind of new ventures, whether they are more like a philanthropic foundation like what we're doing with the initiative for market-based economy, or also in the investment space. But to enable that, I think they really need to understand the full picture, and then using their money to use it in a liberated way, and also in a venture way, that they're really financing this kind of initiatives, not on a project basis, but let's say giving money on a yearly basis, but being committed for, let's say, at least 3 to 5 years, to give the runway to really build initiative, to create the momentum, and to give the time to create the momentum in the end, and also the learnings to adapt to what's happening along the way.
Pauline, do you have a follow-up? No. Who wants to go next? Please make yourself visible. Hand up or virtual hand up. If you don't have a follow-up right now, back to Malte, because you had so many questions. Do you want to add some more, or are we reaching completeness here?
How do you work with governments together now or in the future? So would mean if you have more citizens participating in the initiative and actually making a movement on local grounds, how do you try to work with governments together? I think you mentioned it like a little bit already, but
So I think the most likely scenario is that we create the momentum on a local municipal level, yeah, and work together also with local governments and for example, a mayor of a city or a region, to really include them, because it's all about effectiveness or self-effectiveness of the people that are creating this kind of new solutions that we are all looking for. And we need to support on a local level. But if we create the momentum, let's say we create the first regenerative little cities or communities across the country, then we have also the cases and the examples that we can prove that this is really working. And I see the first that showcase, for example, that we have middle-sized companies that decided already 10 years back to go into renewable energies and circular economy and new material, etc. And it was really kind of an entrepreneurial risk to do it, because they still had to compete with all the companies that are externalizing their costs. Yeah. And then you have a cost unbenefit, so to say, than the others. But now, as things are changing, it becomes a competitive advantage. And we need to showcase these kind of examples, and then we can carrying it up to the more national level of the government, and talk about the regulations and maybe also subsidies that cover up for the running up costs of such businesses, to make the transformation quicker and more successful, so that we are not able to need to overcome all the barriers and hurdles that we are currently facing. So I really believe in bottom up here, because on a national level, it's really hard to have this discussion, and you have all the lobbying groups with deep pockets and a lot of power that are interfering this kind of discussions. And I think this is, when we look at the national level, this is currently happening. That's why I really think we need to activate the people in a positive way on a local level, and then driving it via the local governments, all the way up to the national level.
Can you also help them with like understanding numbers? So for example, if they move towards new Wohlstand, that also means that they save costs somehow on different levels?
So what we currently try to do, as this is kind of a complex topic on the externalities, yeah, but there's more and more research that shows what is the cost of certain practices in business, yeah, and there's a recent study, for example, that the agricultural and food system causes for Germany cost of externalities of 328 billion euros per year, which means that is 7% of GDP of Germany. And now you can break that down to a local level. Yeah, because the costs also occur for this conventional agriculture on a local level, right? Because of drought and then the not utilization of biodiversity, so nature capital goes down, etc., 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 and also the health of the people. And if you are able to make that work in the different directions, so creating a food system that is again working locally, yeah, and utilizing, for example, the production of food locally, bringing it into the shops and have local producers, etc., that will have a positive effect on everyone on a local level. Yeah, but that needs also the support of the local government, for example, saying, okay, in schools, we only provide locally produced food from the local farmers. Or we go to let's say, local companies, and then they say, okay, we provide only local food in our canteens. And that starts making a difference because you're connecting to this local produce of food, for example. And you create local businesses by supporting that. And then we see that currently already happening.
Thank you. Any additional follow-ups, questions, remarks that you would like to position here? Space is open. Yes, Jeremiah, please unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yeah, I would also agree with you, Sebastian, that a regenerative farmer doing regenerative practices in your place, but if you don't have the connection to the people you sell your produce to, you're not a regenerative farmer anymore, because it's all about the connection also on a human level.
Yeah,
I wanted to generally ask if we can also deep dive on some other topics that have been mentioned, because I'm curious about the project that Claudine mentioned earlier, the bioregional project in the Munich area, because that's kind of an implementation of this regenerative market approach. If Claudine would be to share some more insights on that project.
Well, this is very early days. There were a couple of people who started like a working group on designing regenerative cultures through the BENA, which is like the education for sustainable education for adults, which comes from the SDGs. So out of that movement, there were a few people who also helped Daniel Wahl, who is from Munich, to get his book translated and so on and so forth. And just at the end of the last year, we started to meet. And this morning we had a discussion in a smaller group to see how we could structure such a project and how it could be set up and financed and what we would be focusing on and how we could gain traction. I come very much from the perspective that I also work on finance topics a lot, more on systemic change finance. And the other thing that I think is going to be really important is living in a bioregion that's working on regenerative principles, right? So I come very much from the perspective of, do I live in a region that can actually sort of support itself? And therefore, I'm very much interested in data transparency. Like the universities here, no doubt, have tons of knowledge, that is not available to the general public, which would show that we're having one or two problems, most likely. You know, if global supply chains break down, what would it look like? So that is one particular interest that I have. And then the other stream is very much about who. We had a discussion with Daniel on Monday about this. You know, like in that Amazon project or so, you have still indigenous people that you can go to and they still have knowledge. But who do we go to in Bavaria, right? Just like, and we're going like more like, what does the place want to tell us, right? What's the history of the place? And who are still maybe representatives of that old knowledge? So yeah, and we're going to have another larger working group meeting on the 7th of February. And see, like, present how we want to present, you know, our considerations to date, and see how that resonates or not with the larger group. So if you're interested, I don't know if you're in Munich, just feel free to come.
I'm not based in Munich, but I also now recognize that we actually met last October, was it, when Daniel was in Munich for the workshop?
At the workshop, yeah.
Yes, so we actually already met.
Yeah, and this was sort of also a follow-up from that workshop, because there we wanted to do mapping. He wanted to talk about mapping, and we never got there because we realized there's so much to talk about what are actually regenerative principles.
Yeah, would be happy to connect.
Why don't you share some of that in our WhatsApp as well for everybody else to involve and see whether there are other people in Munich. Wonderful. So are there any other questions, remarks, feedback for Sebastian? Or should we give Sebastian some space for some closing remarks for today? I get the feeling that we reach completeness, but Claudine, go ahead. Please.
Yeah. I was just, before we got sort of like sidetracked on Munich, listening to you, Sebastian, talking about like the businesses that already sort of move towards. And so, and I would be interested how you see it, like how much in the current configuration of the system, meaning laws, principles, we're following competitive, you know, notions of, you know, competition over collaboration. And so how much room do you actually see that we can get to a true, you know, sort of sustainable society if we don't change some of the configuration, right?
Yeah, so I think it's always a chicken and egg problem, right? It would be better to have the right regulation, or maybe sometimes no regulation, because much of the regulation is in the end embaking the current system, yeah, and is really holding down innovation that could also change things, because only large organizations and structures actually can comply with certain type of regulations, and this is anti-competitive, right? And so I think we need to have more, let's say, normative values. And that's also what we work on the initiative, to really give people back a framework where they know what's right or not. And they are willing to follow that, whether there is a law or not. And I think that needs to become one of the core drivers, that we have kind of a good compass of how to do a sustainable business and what not to do. So when I'm looking back, my grandfather was an entrepreneur, and he had a lot of this normative values within him, right? Because of all the Christianity background and so on. And he did a lot of philanthropic things, not because of he wants to do philanthropic, but it was part of his entrepreneurial responsibility. Yeah. And he tried to do business without high growth and taking money from the bank. It was kind of an organically grown business, which ran into problems when things become highly competitive, for example, right? And the question is how to make that work in the future, and how regulation, for example, getting the externalities into the balance sheets, yeah, to make externalities transparent, because then probably many of the business would say, okay, we are bankrupt, right? Because we have so many externalities on our balance sheet that we never going to get out in the current state of our business out of our debt towards the society and nature, because our whole business is set up like that. So, but you see, for example, entrepreneurs and companies that say, okay, we need to measure our externalities and be honest to ourselves. And internally, we calculate with 250, 300 euro per ton CO2. And we need to become economically viable with this price of CO2 first, because otherwise, if you're not getting out of this current business as usual and try to optimize that a little bit more, becoming a little bit more efficient, but changing the internal rules of the game completely by calculating the full cost and making, if we are not, let's say, break even with all our externalities, nobody is getting a bonus. Yeah, then things maybe come up differently in your organization. Yes, you have to do still the business, but maybe this becomes a competitive edge when things are starting to change, when costs are getting higher, and then you're driving and developing your business differently. That's why I think, yes, we need some kinds of regulations, but I truly believe that in the end, it will be the entrepreneur, it will be activists on a local level that are really starting to change the game, not by theoreticizing and asking for, oh, we need different regulations, but by just doing it. Yeah. And I think we need to find these people, we need to support these people, we need to accelerate learning and then transfer the learnings of those people to other people, to make that grow and kind of creating the snowball that we need, that is growing in size as quick as possible.
You're muted, Claudine.
I just said thank you.
Yeah, that was a great last comment, I think, to round today's conversation. I don't want to extend it beyond its natural lifespan, which feels to me has arrived for today. But I'm really looking forward to our next session together. And thank you so much, Sebastian, for sharing about the initiative. The next session will likely be next Friday. There's some traveling going on Friday, so it's unclear whether logistics make this possible, but we will keep you posted by WhatsApp and email and other channels. Thank you so much for showing up, participating, being here.
It was a pleasure. Looking forward. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Ciao.
Bye.
Ciao.